This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Hello, good evening and welcome to you all. I thought we'd better start early because I know some of John's friends are saying they've got to leave soon.
That was only a banker.
Oh well, but as long as he pays for the CJ for the next 2 years, we'll be happy. Just want to say that we have to begin with big thanks because we're just a group of volunteers who formed this organization, Commonwealth Journalists Association. Our purpose is to promote freedom of speech, and as you know, there are very, very tragic events and developments all over, especially in Pakistan. And in our way, we try to do what we can to highlight these abuses, draw attention to them, and that is unfortunately all that we can do. But it's thanks to generous organizations like the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, which has given us access to this room. And also want to thank Vita Biotics for financing this, the reception, which you're all welcome to come to later after this talk. And so that is again something else to look forward to, because that seems to be a highlight of our gatherings. We have meetings roughly once a month on international issues. Now, this whole event really began with John, because he's based in Delhi, but he said he was going to be in London for 2 weeks to promote his book, which many of you have bought, which is IMPLOSION, India's Tryst with Reality. And we thought, okay, why doesn't John come and launch this? And of course, as it happens, it was very timely, and we decided to broaden the discussion and to bring in other eminent experts and guests, which has happened now. I'm glad that most of them have recently been to India, so they can sort of give us some of the flavor, the mood, and the atmosphere in India amongst the voters. You are all experts, and you will know, of course, that this is pretty dramatic elections this time. Many are calling it the greatest show on earth. There are an estimated 814 million voters. They have more than 500 political parties to choose from. The man regarded as possibly the most likely Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is charismatic but divisive. So there's hope and there are concerns. Many people, I gather, are going from overseas because they feel it's time for change. They're desperate for clean government and for economic growth. There are also concerns about communism and possible communism, which people hear about soon. The person who will guide us through this discussion is, of course, Andrew Whitehead. And Andrew is ideally qualified to moderate this meeting today. He is editor of the BBC World Service News and a former BBC Delhi correspondent who has lived and worked in Delhi for a total of 7 years. He's also a historian and wrote A Mission in Kashmir, an account of the early stages of the Kashmir conflict in 1947, and these are based on personal testimonies, and on the basis of which he was awarded a PhD by the University of Warwick last year. So I won't say any more now and hand you over to Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita, and a very warm welcome to all of you for what I'm sure will be a very interesting evening. The subject we have in front of us is India Election 2014, Should the World Care? ? And I'm relying on all of the panel to answer in the affirmative, otherwise it could be a very short evening indeed. I was in India very briefly earlier in the month and got a brief, vicarious sense of the energy and passion in this election campaign, and just what a landmark election it is likely to be. I can't think of an Indian election in the period when I've been following Indian affairs closely, which is now more than 20 years, where the outcome has been in many ways so clear, but the consequences so uncertain, and for some people so alarming, but not for everybody, and I think we're going to tease out some of those issues tonight. So what's going to happen? We have a very distinguished panel of 4 speakers, each of whom is going to speak for a few minutes to make some opening points about the election and why it is so interesting. And then I'm going to open out the discussion to you, and it'll become a question and answer and a panel discussion. But first of all, let me introduce our 4 panellists tonight. John Elliott, on my immediate right, has been a correspondent based in Delhi for the Financial Times and for Fortune. He's been covering India since the 1980s. He's the author of a much-read and respected blog, Riding the Elephant, which he describes as a journalist's unedited take on current events. And he's the author, as Rita's mentioned, of a book just published by HarperCollins entitled Implosion, India's Tryst with Reality, which is on sale tonight for £10, which is half the Amazon UK price. And if you haven't got a copy yet, you'd better hurry, because we were down to the last couple of copies just a few minutes ago. On my left is Meghna Desai, Lord Desai, a renowned economist, the author of books including The Rediscovery of India, Rethinking Islamism, The Ideology of the New Terror, and this book he's described as his greatest achievement, a biography of the film star Dilip Kumar. He's also a life peer, and I was thrilled to discover that you are Baron Desai of St Clement Danes, which of course just stands just outside Bush House, where the World Service was based for many decades. And Lord Desai sits on the Labour benches in the upper house. Ashish Ray on the far right was CNN's head of bureau in Delhi when I pitched up there in the 1990s, and has also been a correspondent for the Times of India. And I discovered, I've done a bit of research, became a test match commentator on All India Radio at the tender age of 24, and has also written a book on Indian cricket, as well as remaining one of the best regarded commentators and analysts on India. And Hassan Saror on my far left was a correspondent for many years for one of India's finest daily papers, The Hindu, including a long spell as its London correspondent. And he's also recently published a book with the title of India's Muslim Spring, Why Is Nobody Talking About It? And I imagine he will be talking about that in just a few minutes' time. And this book is also on sale at the back tonight for the bargain price of £5. As Rita said, this event was initially thought of as a launch and promotion of John Elliott's new and very excellent book, and it's become something bigger and broader than that. But I think it's right that we ask John to speak first, and perhaps give you a little bit more laxity about time than the other panellists. And I'm going to start by giving you a flavour of his book by reading from its introduction, which says, India punches below its weight, failing to achieve what it could and should be doing. It constantly disappoints admirers and validates the views of critics. With declining economic performance, poor governance, and endemic corruption, people have begun to ask, why is India proving such a failure? John.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stand up for this bit. In India, people always do this. I always assume it's to see if the electricity is working. That paragraph, by the way, is on the back cover of the book, and I was about to read it, but I needn't now. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Rita, for organising it, and everybody else involved in the organisation. Andrew, for tearing yourself away from the Beeb to moderate it. Hassan and Ashish, who I have not met before, thank you also. And Meghna Desai, as he is in India, Lord Desai, as he is here, and Lord Meghna Desai, as he is in most Indian newspapers. Thank you for doing this twice. Meghna Desai chaired the session at the Jaipur Literary Festival when an early run of the book was launched in January. So it's nice of you to turn out twice. Last time you were leading the conversation, but thank you. The answer, I think, on the election, then I'm going to skip on to the book, is yes, it's important because it affects Indian communities abroad. It affects how they will behave and how they will feel. It's important because of the big international, India is a big international customer and supplier, and whether that will go up and down. And just because India is India, and also out of curiosity to see what happens to tired dynasties and driven potential leaders. What I'd like to do is to map out first how the book came about and why I wrote it, and then start a discussion on the main argument, which is about Jugaad and Chalta Hai. Jugaad is fix-it, for those of you who don't know. It comes from an engineering background where people put together a couple of wheels and a couple of planks and an engine and turn it into a truck for farm use and on the rural roads of Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. And then it goes through to fix it in a more general way, in the way I'm using it, where a society which doesn't believe in rules and regulations is always fixing things in order to try and make sure they come okay eventually. And coming okay eventually is the Chalta Hai. And the Commonwealth Games, which I'm sure many of you must have read about, was pure jigard, because everybody was fixing it all the way through, often corruptly, and they all assumed that by the end it would be okay on the night, as we would say in a theatre, which in fact it almost was. I mean, ticketing goes wrong in most countries, national games, international games, but that's the theme. And then there's another theme which I come to at the end, which is that India uses democracy as an excuse for what doesn't happen. They don't build roads like they do in China because China doesn't have democracy and it's so easy. Manmohan Singh can't run the government because it's a coalition. What can we do? That's democracy. And that's great, and democracy obviously is an essential part of India, and it would be a dreadful place without it. But it has become an excuse for what doesn't happen. People often ask me why implosion. I first thought of this 2 years ago. It's not a reference to the state of India today, nor at any other time. I had it, though, in the contract I signed with HarperCollins 2 years ago in February, had implosion in it. So I was thinking about it then, and the alternative title was Riding the Elephant, which is the blog. And gradually over the last year, it seemed appropriate. And then somebody said to me, well, what does it mean? And I realized I didn't know. So I went to Google, which solves all journalists and other people's problems these days, and found a definition which satisfied exactly what I had been writing about in this book over the previous 2 or 3 years. The word implosion, I write, has various connotations. It usually conjures up dramatic images of buildings and glass shattering inwards, and of objects collapsing violently. In fact, when we started to think about the cover, the first thing that the HarperCollins designer said was, why don't we just have the big word implosion and then put some flames coming out of the side? And then we gradually worked to this brilliant cover. And I often say, well, a cover like this, who cares about what's in the book inside? Buy it for the cover. What is happening in India is not that sort of massive one-off event of implosion, of things collapsing, but a more insidious and equally dramatic inward collapse. Internal forces are gradually eating away at institutions, organizational procedures, and the functioning of authority that are needed to run a country. Contributing to this creeping implosion are self-serving politicians and government officials, plus widespread and endemic corruption and a lack of interest in tackling problems. When such developments swamp and begin to destroy the political process, the judiciary and the media, implosion has begun. I was very lucky because on the day that this book was launched in February, there was a huge row in Parliament over the formation of Telangana, the breaking up of the Andhra Pradesh state. A story which I could go into, but it's centered on one chapter here, which is called Scam Andhra, where I take Andhra Pradesh as a microcosm of all that's wrong with crony capitalism in India. And the day before this book was launched, one MP who didn't want the state split got very angry with those of other MPs and had a pepper spray and went round the Parliament pepper spraying other MPs. Some of you are nodding your head. You obviously read the story on the net. What most people don't realise is that that guy who did it wasn't just an MP who didn't want to lose. Let me start again. He wasn't just an MP. He was also the founder chairman of one of India's biggest infrastructure companies called Lanco, heavily indebted now and in financial problems, but nevertheless one of the biggest power project builders. So here you have a society where a guy starts a business in my scam Andhra, and then grows around the country and then gets so angry with people who want to, he thinks, threaten his investments by splitting the state, that he does pepper spray. So I was lucky that that came out, and that happened when it did. Other things, and then very quickly, then I'm going to stop. I have a few other, one of the nice things about writing a book for an Indian publisher, although this is HarperCollins, it's HarperCollins India. It's published there, but available internationally via Amazon. Is that you can more or less write what you like. You can roam around the subject, whereas if you write it for a foreign publisher, then an international publisher abroad, then you've got to package your thing much more. So I was able to roam off into areas that I wanted to roam off into, including the 1991 reforms, where I track how Manmohan Singh was not the architect of those reforms, and uncover a document called the M document, which Montek Singh Ahluwalia wrote, and was then leaked, probably by him, to the Financial Express in 1990. He told me about it. He hasn't admitted that he did the leak. I also mention, and I'm sorry he's not here, because Humphrey Hawkesbury, the BBC correspondent, who was one of my main helpers on the book, was involved in this. I was present, for those of you who know about the Kargil War on the border, the mini-war on the Kargil borders in 1999, I was present at a place called Kel, which is an army camp up on the Pakistan border, with Nawaz Sharif, when Musharraf says that he briefed him, thereby saying it was a political decision, that war, and not a military decision. I'd gone up with Nawaz Sharif because I was following him for a day to write an article for Fortune magazine, and I didn't discover until 3 years later that he was supposedly briefed at that time. And then Humphrey Hawkesbury, the BBC correspondent, turned up in Delhi a little bit later and said, John, he'd been in Pakistan researching a novel, and he said, John, Pakistan's going to invade India in the near future. And I said, what a load of rubbish. Mr. Bajpai, the Prime Minister, has just been by bus to Lahore. And those of you who follow India-Pakistan relations will remember the time that Bajpai made this great peace effort. Just 10 days before, he had gone across the border, and Humphrey had been told about the war that it was coming, and I didn't write it, so I missed the story twice. I think I've had my time. I've skated around the book. I'm going to sit down now.
Why stop? Why stop? Go on.
It's a brave admission, the journalist who missed the story twice. Thank you very much, John. I'm going to call now on...
came from the BBC.
Lord Desai.
How many minutes?
If we aim for 5.
Well, I think John has started a bad example, so I'll have to stand up. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody, Sheila, for inviting me and all that. Now, first of all, should the world care about India? Should India care about the world? It's a more interesting question. And I think actually India is now coming to a stage where it doesn't actually care about whether the world likes it or not. It's not grown up. I mean, there are still people who think that the best thing to do to warn Indians is to write to the Guardian or the Independent, you know. I mean, I'm still waiting to see a passionate letter in the Hindu about breakup of the UK when Scotland leaves. But, you know, I'm still waiting for that. Maybe it will happen. Or this shocking fact that Cameron will become a Christian. Anyway, I think this is a very different election from any previous one. Partly because, you know, 67 years have gone by. India is much sure of itself, much more relaxed about it. Not everybody is relaxed, but I think a lot of the younger generation, you know, whatever it is, 2/3 of people who are under 35, if you talk to them, you know, they have a future. They don't worry too much about the past. This is a very, unlike what John said, I think it's a very robust democracy. And since I spent more time here than in India, I would say, you know, like the British muddled through, India muddles through. And things look like they're not working, but they're perfectly working well. I would say that this is also a different election because the majority of people who think they're going to be Prime Minister, I mean, there are about 10 people who think they're going to be Prime Minister, majority of them have been born after independence. And it's most likely that the Prime Minister, whoever goes to Red Fort on 15th of August 2014, would have been somebody born after independence. So that is a landmark to notice. It's also most likely that the person who will become Prime Minister will have his or her roots in a state and have acquired executive experience as a Chief Minister, much more than as a minister, you know. I mean, there are people who became ministers, who became Prime Ministers with either no executive experience whatsoever, like Rajiv Gandhi or Vajpayee, or, you know, sort of just having been minister en passant and so became or in the Gujarat was not even a minister. I think he was a minister. He was a minister of information broadcasting and became Prime Minister. This time, if it's Jayalalitha or Mamata Banerjee or Mayawati or Narendra Modi, these guys come with fantastic experience, executive experience. And states in India have balanced their budgets, unlike the center. These people get things done. They actually know. You talk to a state chief minister like Nitish Kumar, and he'll tell you district by district what's happening. So this is going to be a new generation. And as far as I know, I can predict, or even the betting shops are now giving rupee 42 paisa on Narendra Modi for a rupee of bet, and 7 rupees for Rahul Gandhi, and 500 for Arvind Kejriwal. So if you want to make a lot of money, bet your money on Arvind Kejriwal. So it's almost certain that come 16th of May, by about lunchtime, there will be a government in India. It will be BJP NDA government, and BJP NDA, the core NDA, which is BJP plus Shiv Sena plus Shiromani Akali Dal, will get a majority. You heard it here first. I have very little doubt about that. There are lots of scenarios about getting 170 and Narendra Modi not being able to be prime minister. I mean, there are about 15 people in BJP having that dream, but none of that is going to happen. And I am not terribly worried about what is going to happen to the Muslims, because and Hassan Surur will tell you much more about that, because life has moved on. I think after the Sarcha Commission report, it is quite clear that the Muslims were not being helped by the entire facade of policies which are being pursued by the secularist parties. And I think I would say the same thing about Mandal. It's about time India got out of this stuff and really said on objective criterion, who are the people who need help? Forget about the jatis, forget about the religion, just actually build a nation on basis of objective criteria of social and economic deprivation. And go with that. And don't go on having this cellular division of 7,000 jatis and 25 religions and making as many minorities as you can get. I mean, recently the Jats were made into other backward classes. Very soon only Brahmins will be left who are not a backward class. Everybody else will be backward. Even among Brahmins there might be a tussle as to who is the backward Brahmin and not a very backward Brahmin. Okay, so I think what is now going on is, after the policy paralysis of last 3 years, a real hunger for change and for a decisive prime minister. Not necessarily dictatorial, because I don't know prime minister can be dictatorial. I mean, Indira Gandhi tried, but after that there's not been a dictatorial prime minister, regardless of what majority you get, because the states are very powerful in India now. And states are so powerful. For example, poor Chidambaram found out when he was home minister that he wanted to have a national anti-terror agency, and the states would get lost. Law and order is our subject, not your subject, and don't wave this terrorism shroud at us. We will not abide by what you say. Similarly, and of course, someone like Narendra Modi is a sort of a states' right federalist. I mean, he actually genuinely believes that much more responsibility should go to the states rather than be under the center. So we're about to see a very different kind of structure from years of Congress had a centralist mentality because they had been through independence. They think they were the only people who went through independence, but that's another story. But then they were socialists, so they believed in central planning and all that. For 67 years, the centralist bias was there. Now there's going to be decentralist bias in Indian politics. And to the extent that, that the ruling coalition will be reasonably safe, it will last 5 years. The last 3 governments in India have lasted 5 years. So I don't think it's going to be any doubt that this government is going to last 5 years. And I think what I expect to see is much more business as normal, with the usual difficulties, some of which John described. No prime minister can solve all of India's problems, not even in 3 lifetimes. Corruption, for example, is not going to be solved by anybody, here, there, or anywhere. Because if you have noticed, India's elections would be impossible without a lot of black money. The Election Commission has just announced that they have captured 240 crores worth of cash. They just want to be caught. how much is going on, right? About 10 times that, or maybe 20 times that. 240 crore rupees in sweet cash. So India's elections, India's whole electoral democracy depends on black money. And it's not possible no matter what politicians say. And it is a functional corruption. Because as the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh said, why do people worry about corruption? All the money goes back in anyway. So it's a way of circulating money. Okay, how many more minutes have I got? 1 minute. Okay, so don't lie awake at night. India is not lying awake at night. Most of them are not lying awake at night. By now, the result is probably done because more than half the seats have been voted upon. And I think one thing to look forward to is that I think that within the next 10 years, India will see the back of poverty, and poverty will be less than 10% by 2025. There you go.
Thank you, Lord Desai. You've been very bold in calling the election, but as you say, the odds on the candidate that you prefer are so modest, it's not worth us going out and putting our money on it.
There's no point in putting any money in election. It's done. It's a done deal.
Ashish.
Thank you, Andrew. I agree with much of John's criticism of India, because if you are a patriotic Indian, then you would tend to agree that while India is a functioning democracy, it's not a flawless one. And therefore, we have miles to go before we can sleep.
Give me a glass of water.
I must say that I'm impressed by Meghnad Desai's optimism, because his optimism goes beyond the most optimistic projections that I've seen as far as the polls are concerned. But then I'm sure if Narendra Modi came to know about his views, he'd be delighted. The question is, should the world care? The world should indeed care. When the world's most populous democracy, when more than 800 million people are eligible to vote in an election, when an emerging economy, which is forecast to be the 5th biggest in 6 years' time, is going in for a general election, I think the world should sit up and take notice. Because India, with its huge market, is an opportunity for the entire world. And therefore stability, and therefore a system which is decent not only for people within India, but for people outside India, is what the world looks forward to. In 1942, after the Quit India movement, almost the entire leadership of the Indian National Congress, and that was the mainstream movement, were put behind bars by British authorities. It created an empty playing field for communalists, the forces of evil, Hindu communalists, Muslim communalists, even Sikh communalists. And they played and really ran amok. In that scenario, people slaughtered each other. At least 1 million people died in the communal riots. Some scholars say the figure may have been as high as 2 million. So from those ashes arose an independent India. An independent India where its forefathers and its founders had thought long and hard what would be the best course for the country. Because not only had the confrontation between the communities divided the nation into two, but there was every danger that a multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious India would face the same problems unless some corrective measures were taken. It is fortunate that India emerged not only as a democracy from day one, but a secular democracy from day one. And if today any attempt is made to tear apart that carefully woven fabric of secularism, India is looking for trouble. And the world, I think, is also looking at India with concern. Secularism has kept India united. In this city of London, people who opposed India's freedom were remarking that India would fall apart, that India would disintegrate. It didn't happen. It didn't happen because Jawaharlal Nehru adopted what were not only his convictions, but the convictions of Mahatma Gandhi, the convictions of Subhash Bose, and many others in not only the Indian National Congress movement, but across the Indian mainstream as far as the freedom struggle went. And having established secularism, a secularism taken forward by Lal Bahadur Shastri, India today has survived. Today, admittedly, because of the failures of the Congress-led government, the failures in the last 2 to 3 years, when prices have gone up beyond control, when food inflation has been alarming, and when employment has not been generated to the extent desirable, Congress have become unpopular. The fact that an economy was growing in excess of 10% GDP in 2010 has now dropped to 5%, perhaps is not that serious a matter. India is still growing at 100 billion a year. But then India's expectations have risen to such an extent that people expect, they think it's their birthright for India to grow at 10%. It's an unrealistic demand, but then that is the crucial situation. Congress today are unpopular and possibly facing defeat in the coming election. But then what is the alternative? Is India going to remain a respectable secular nation or lurch towards a theocratic India? The monstrosity of an India where the ruling people will believe in Hindu supremacy and nothing else. And let there be no mistake. Narendra Modi's sole and primary agenda is Hindu supremacy and nothing else. This talk about the Gujarat model of growth is bunkum. Gujarat has been ranked by the governor of the Reserve Bank of India as 14th among 28 states in India. It is not exactly an example to follow. The track record in Gujarat in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of women's affairs is among the worst in the country. When Modi took over as Chief Minister of Gujarat, the state's debt to the central government was £4.5 billion. Today it is 18 billion pounds. It is the second highest among all the states in the country. Every citizen of Gujarat has a debt burden of rupees 30,000 over his or her head. That is the performance of Gujarat, shining at one end, but bleak at the other. It is not an example or a model to follow. A man, I'm sorry to say, who failed to finish school and makes the excuse that it was because of poverty that he didn't finish school, is not a person to be taken seriously. Manmohan Singh also came from a poor background, went on to study at Oxford and Cambridge. That is the kind of mettle. He may not have proved to be the sternest or the most assertive prime minister, but he has been a decent one. And therefore, the big question before India today is, do you punish the failures of a Congress-led government of the last 3 years out of the 10 years that they've been in government with an alternative which could be absolutely devastating for India? That is the big question. There is no other question. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I leave to you to decide whether it would be good for India or bad for India, whether it will be good for the world or bad for the world. So the world should not only care, the world should be concerned.
Thank you. It's very clear that some of the passion which is being expressed on the platform in India is also being expressed here tonight as well. Hassan.
Thank you, Andrew. I agree with much of what Ashish has said, though I don't share his alarmist sort of perception. But I'll basically make a few quick points about the so-called Muslim factor, which has got so much attention. The beauty of this election actually is that it has made the Muslim factor almost redundant because the heavy sort of consolidation of the Hindu vote behind Modi. And so whether they vote for Modi or don't vote for Modi, they are stuck with him. And I think that was the whole intention when the BJP chose Modi. The rest of the thing, that is a strong leader, decisive leader, wedded to development agenda, I think that's a lot of guff because there are other BJP leaders who are equally good and they are not as tainted as Mr. Modi is. And but of course that is a BJP's prerogative, they have chosen him. As far as the Muslim factor is concerned, there's this big media narrative that Muslims are very scared of Modi and they think that come May 16 and they'll be probably declared as second-class citizens and India will become a Hindu state. I think there's a lot of exaggeration here. I don't think Muslims are spending sleepless nights thinking that on May 16 they'll be marched to Ramlila Maidan and shot. They, of course, because they have confidence, they know that there are enough secular Hindus who will not allow that to happen. They have their worries, but their worries are more like any other secular Indians' worry, which is that probably the fringe element in the Sangh Parivar will become more in your face. Sorry, the communal discourse will become more shrill. And of course, there will be this usual things, the tampering with textbooks, the key institutions will be packed with RSS people. This also happened in the Vajpayee, and under Modi probably things will be a little worse. So it's not so much that Muslims fear Modi as they hate him actually. And they hate him, hatred is the same as they once hated Advani when he was leading the Ayodhya movement. And some of these, of course, and Modi hasn't done anything to really win them over. You know, the whole message from the BJP and the Modi has been that we actually don't need Muslims. You know, we can win on the basis of the Hindu vote, and that's rather dangerous. And also think that a lot of Muslims have actually painted themselves into a corner, so they can't sort of bring themselves to say anything nice about him even if they want to. There is also a bigger debate going on within the Muslim community, and which is what my book is all about, which is that Muslims should sort of draw a line under the past. They should stop obsessing about Ayodhya and Gujarat and move on. They should sort of put their heads down, focus on the issues that really matter: employment, education, and bread if not butter. So I think that is what, and that they should be a little more practical in making political choices. They don't have to put all their eggs in one secular basket. And I think that has started happening actually in recent years. There has been a fragmentation of the Muslim vote, and even this time I think a lot of Muslims might will vote for Aam Aadmi Party, who would have otherwise probably voted for the Congress. So, and a lot of Muslims may also end up actually voting for Mr. Modi, especially in Gujarat, whether out of fear, out of sheer pragmatism or whatever, but that will happen. With this election, I don't think, I mean, of course, Ashish has tried to sort of paint it as a Hindu-Muslim thing and a secularism versus communalism. To some extent it is, but largely it is not. Both issues, both the BJP and the Congress to sort of frame this debate in those terms, because then the BJP consolidates the Hindu vote and the Congress hopes to win the Muslim votes. And I also think it's wrong, I mean, that to paint every Modi supporter as communal, because there are a lot of Modi bashers who are sort of deeply communal. I mean, Shahi Imam of Jami Masjid is no paragon of secular virtues. And we know about Congress's own selective secularism. I mean, if Congress had really been secular, we would not have reached a point where we are today that Mr. Modi sort of is on the verge of becoming our next Prime Minister. My problem, difficulty with this election is that it has become too much about one man. And a man who is accused of having blood on his hands, and the man who refuses to accept moral responsibility for what happened on his watch. It's all about Modi, Modi, Modi. Even the BJP doesn't matter anymore. It's the same, it's like the personality cult that sort of sprung around Mrs. Gandhi in the 70s. And look what happened. She was also hailed as a great, decisive and strong leader. But she was the one who actually ended up, tried to destroy democracy and ended up actually destroying her own party. There's no Congress because of Mrs. Gandhi. So the BJP should be careful what it wishes for, and I think that applies to Indian voters as well before they take a decision. This, actually the whole campaign is, we are being told that in India this going through a national crisis, and so we need a very strong and decisive leader. But what is a national crisis? I mean, we're not facing external aggression. The peasants are not up in revolt. The army is not threatening a coup. Basically what has happened is that the economy has slowed down and the big business is cheesed off with Manmohan Singh. So they are not backing any horse. The whole Modi campaign is being driven by corporate India. And I mean, one can only speculate, but if the big business had not thrown its weight behind Mr. Modi in the way it has, I'm not sure whether the so-called Modi phenomenon would really have become so big. So it's not really, and then there's a bigger sort of, I think there's a moral dimension to this whole Modi thing, because here's a man on whose watch hundreds of people were killed, not just Muslims, the Hindus as well. And they were his citizens, his people. He has always said that the entire Gujarati people, they are like my family. But and it was his moral responsibility to protect them. He had a care of duty to these guys. And he failed. But instead of apologizing or saying sorry, we heard this gratuitous sort of puppy analogy. I don't know whether, I'm sure that all of you have heard about this, what he said about the puppy. I mean, he gave an interview where he was asked whether he felt any remorse at all. And he said, well, we are all human beings. Even if a puppy is knocked down by a bus, we feel remorse. So all that has upset Muslims, and that's one reason why they hate him so much. And then this whole business that he won 3 successive elections, so there's a democratic legitimacy, and then all this moral equivalence that because riots happened under the Congress, so what's the big deal about the Gujarat riots? If winning the election is the only criterion, then Rajiv Gandhi also won with massive majority the election that was held after the anti-Sikh riots. So does that absolve Congress of any responsibility? Then why does the BJP go on and on about the Sikh riots? And we always thought that the BJP has claimed that it is a party with a difference and that it sort of should be judged by higher moral standards. But I think it has fairly shown moral taste in this particular case, because they refused to accept responsibility for what happened in Gujarat. And I'm not saying that this is, let's forget the allegations against him. Let's give him the benefit of doubt and say he tried his best and failed. Yet ultimately the moral responsibility is his for what happened there. And I think he does owe an explanation for that. So for me, Modi poses this basically a bit of a moral dilemma. I mean, people are free to make choices in a democracy and one should respect it. But I think at some point one should sort of pause a bit and ask whether it's also morally right. I mean, are we so keen to see trains run on time that we sort of overlook everything else? I mean, I don't have a vote in India, but if I had, I wouldn't vote for Mr. Modi for the simple reason that a man who's so insensitive to the grief of suffering of his own people and who thinks that probably 170 million people can be dispensed with, has no moral stature to be India's Prime Minister.
Thank you, Hassan. It's perhaps inevitable that a discussion of the current Indian election campaign boils down to fairly passionate views about the suitability of Narendra Modi to be the Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy and the culpability that he has, allegedly, for the killings in Gujarat 12 years ago. But I want to start the questioning on a different tone. Hassan, you mentioned the Aam Aadmi Party, the Common Man Party, the Anti-Corruption Party, which achieved a dramatic political breakthrough in the Delhi state elections in December and is fielding candidates in most of the big urban centres and beyond.
460 candidates.
So flash in the pan, or does it matter? John?
Oh, right, I thought you were going to ask somebody else.
It shouldn't be a flash in the pan, because Narendra Modi and the BJP, even though they will get growth going simply by having a change of government, things will change, they'll move on. There's no way that Narendra Modi will tackle the problems that I'm talking about in this book, which are partly centred around corruption. He himself, although he claims to run a clean government, can't be doing that. Those of you who watch India closely will know the name Adani, which is a company a big group in Gujarat that's come up over the time he was chief minister. He's been chief minister, and also Mukesh Ambani. They're all close to him. I was in a group the other day and I mentioned crony capitalism, and somebody in the crowd said, well, that's Modi. He is crony capitalism. So he won't change the country, and the country won't change past. But the advantage of the AAP is that they do believe in change. Okay, they look a rabble. Okay, they'll probably only win one seat in Parliament, where they were dreaming of maybe 12 or more earlier on. The latest polls indicate only one, and that's in Delhi, where they were hoping to get 4 or 5. Okay, when they were elected in Delhi, they never wanted to be elected in Delhi. They wanted to be a minority party. They weren't ready to do it. They played around and sat on pavements instead of sitting in the office and running the place. But they believe in change. They believe in tackling corruption. And whether they stay the AAP or get renamed, you need that sort of force, and that sort of force does not exist in India. The left could perform that role, but it's past it. The left has restraining influences on governments, but it doesn't believe in reform, as it showed in West Bengal, where it finished up running the government for 33 or 34 years and ran a highly corrupt and vicious government. So the left can't do it. The AAP should. And as an observer, I would say I hope that they don't die away totally with just one seat in Delhi, because they do deserve more, and they ought to become an important minority group. You need that sort of pressure in India for change, and it does reflect what the youth want. And the important point, if I just go on one moment longer, the important point, which hasn't quite been mentioned here, is the youth. I'm no good at figures, and I can't remember what the percentage is. You'll remember, Meghan.
I said 2/3 under 35. 2/3 under 35.
2/3 under 35. And many of them new voters. Somebody said new voters who were born after independence. Many of them were born after liberalisation started in 1991. They have no ideas of what the earlier India was like. They don't have any idea of what India should be. But what they do want is action. They do want growth. They do want performance. And that's why they seem to be voting for Modi, though I wish that they would also vote for Arvind Kejriwal and the AAP. But Modi gives the impression that he can do things, not that the Gujarat model, the arguments over the Gujarat model are fascinating and detailed and normally right. But that's not the point. The point is that Modi delivered for businessmen in Gujarat. Whether he delivered for the poor is not the issue. The main point is that the corporate India felt that he ran the sort of state where they could succeed, and therefore they felt he should be Prime Minister. The next step to become Prime Minister from being Chief Minister of a state where he does run it autocratically is an open question. And I think it's highly unlikely that he'd be an effective Prime Minister. But you can be a dictator, you can be an autocrat in the Prime Minister's office, you can be. But the point is, it doesn't work. So you need the AAP for change.
Magnat, on the AAP.
Yeah, on AAP, I think I agree with quite a lot of what John said. I think they were, in December and January, if you're in India, there was no other topic of conversation except the Aam Aadmi Party. And a lot of people who would not be seen dead joining any political party in India thought they could join the political party. It's the first modern political party in Indian history where you can actually join, like, parties here, Labour Party, Conservative Party. You can join and you can pay your dues and you can go to meetings. They still haven't got a structure outside Delhi. They probably should not have resigned after 49 days. They're somewhat like a student movement. They have demands. Every day there's another demand, but But I think the crucial thing about this election is not so much whether Modi is going to win or not, but the collapse of the Congress. And I think this is the irretrievable collapse of the Congress. Congress is not going to come back. Aam Aadmi Party is going to take the place of Congress across the country as the left of center decent party in which the whole issue of secularism has never arisen. They're just a modern party. People just presume they're secular because their whole agenda has never been based on the caste, religion, anything like that. They're not a Mandal party, they're not a sort of Muslim vote bank party. Now, crucial question is between 2014 and 2019, can they get their act together, have good organization across the country? Because I think they will get a vote share which will be way in excess of the seat share. But I think Aam Aadmi Party is a permanent presence in Indian politics. And what's more, it may inspire copycats because what India needs more than anything else is a decent right-of-center party because no single party in India is right-of-center. They all think they are populist left-wing parties, including the BJP. And so I think it may lead to a whole different formation in India which will be full of interesting modern parties.
Ashish, Meghnad says the Aam Aadmi Party is set to replace Congress as the decent party.
I totally disagree. I think the AAP is a phenomenon similar to the UKIP in this country. Every country experiences midterm blues. And if the economy is down, you get freak results. And so, when the economy has been down in this country, unemployment has been high, you blame not only the government of the day, but the main parties of the day. And so there's a protest vote. And in that protest vote has emerged UKIP in this country and the Aam Aadmi Party in India. Probably, and I say probably, some of them meant well in that party. But what is the party's ideology? What is their philosophy? What do they stand for? Some people speak like anarchists, some like Maoists, others like the RSS. What exactly is their ideology? They sound very fascist and intolerant in their attitude. I don't think it's a party that can last beyond this election because they might end up with something like 2 or 3 seats, if that. The important thing is that at the end of the day, they would have been seen to have been the party that ran away when entrusted with the responsibility and of acting irresponsibly, having no cohesiveness as a political organization, functioning like a pressure group. Indeed, had it not been for the clumsy handling of Anna Hazare by the Congress party, the Aam Aadmi Party would not have existed today. So they have received disproportionate attention from Indian media. Indian media has been grossly biased in giving attention to this man, Arvind Kejriwal, where the chief minister of the largest state in the country, Uttar Pradesh, which is a state, Delhi is not even a state as far as the framework of the Indian constitution is concerned. But the attention that Kejriwal has received as opposed to the chief minister, let us say, of Uttar Pradesh is quite mind-boggling. As far as I'm concerned, the party is over.
I'm going to bring Hassan in just a moment, but I know you're dying to come in there, John.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question, Ashish. What do you want? You've wiped the reputation of Narendra Modi, understandably to a certain point, and therefore you don't want anybody to vote BJP. You've rubbished the Aam Aadmi as
Congress.
As freaks.
He likes Congress.
Do you seriously,
he likes Congress.
Do you seriously want India's Rahul Gandhi and for the next 20 years?
Since you asked the question,
The Economist does, the Economist does, and I can't believe it. What do you?
since you asked the question, and the Economist has, yes,
Yes.
after doing a somersault, having backed Modi for a considerable period of time, they did a somersault.
Well, they
and
interviewed him, they didn't quite back him.
they gave the impression that it's better to support even a feeble Rahul Gandhi rather than.
And that's your line.
No, well, certainly, yes, I do. I'm not for a moment standing here as a proponent of the Congress party or the Gandhi family. The Congress's failures are today responsible for the situation India is facing. The failures began under Indira Gandhi. The pandering to the Hindu vote began under Indira Gandhi. It continued under Rajiv Gandhi. But then let me also say this. In 1977, people said the party is over for the Congress. They said the same thing in 1989. They said it throughout the second half of the 1990s. And yet, this party bounced back. Do you know what the track record of non-Congress governments are? The track record is that 4 times this organization called the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, have been either in their present incarnation or in the incarnation of the Bharatiya Janata Sangh been in government. 1977, the government lasted 2.5 years. In 1996, the government lasted 13 days. In 1998, 1 year. The only time that they've managed to fulfill a full term in government was between 1999 and 2004. So the track record is actually pretty abysmal.
I'm going to bring Hassan in here. Do you think the party is over for Congress?
I don't think so, because as she said, it has been said many times before. I mean, the obituary of the Congress has been written not by once but many times, and it has always come back. And I also believe that, I mean, I'm not a Congress supporter in the sense I've never voted for Congress in my life except once when the wife of a friend of mine was contesting for the Delhi Metropolitan Council elections. But I still think that it's the only truly national party, and which represents all shades of opinion in the country. And it's like the big tent, and I think if there is any big tent, it's the Congress party. And the Aam Aadmi Party is a flash in the pan, and I think it's just not going to last.
I'm going to throw the discussion open to you. So if you have any questions or points you want to make, Amit.
Yes.
You're going to have to project yourself a little bit because we don't have any microphones, I'm afraid.
I'll say just this, that India is a very funny country. And it's a country of waves that you can get a party swept in, and a few years later, that same party is swept out. And I think back to 75, when Mrs. Gandhi was very unpopular. 77, she holds a general election, she's absolutely swept out. And the pundits at the time were saying, she's finished. And the same woman, 2 years later, is swept in. So the lesson is that although half of India has voted, it may or may not be a done deal. It looks as though Narendra Modi is going to come in. As to what is going to happen when we are back here in 5 years' time, what will be the consensus? Well, the sensible answer is it depends. It depends on how the new government performs. If it does well, Mr. Modi might be given another 5 years in government. If he doesn't, and there are differences within the new government and factional infighting, it's all possible, then it is possible that Congress will reform. It's a bit too early to make any firm judgments. I think the answer is it just depends.
Thank you very much. Let's hear some more contributions from the floor, please.
Can I just ask a question on India-Pakistan, but quite specifically, Arad Zaman from the Commonwealth Business Council, quite specifically around the economic potential? And I ask this in, bearing in mind three factors. I mean, one is the World Bank's very upbeat assessment a few days ago of South Asia, probably its most upbeat for quite some time. But the second is the relative political stability that Pakistan is now, after an election, probably an election that will see a government go through a full term. Also a very high level of participation in Pakistan in an election. And the other thing is the appetite that is clearly there, that was unleashed by the Aam Aadmi Party initiative, the Times of India Young initiative on India-Pakistan, and the economic linkages have been a very strong component of that. So, we brought the Pakistan Business Council and the CII together at the Commonwealth Forum a couple of years ago, and what was striking was the appetite for collaboration. So given the role of the business sector in probably the incoming government, my question is, what shift, if any, do we expect in that area?
Let me just repeat that to make sure that everybody's heard that at the back. So the question is about the impact of the election on relations between India and Pakistan, and particularly commercial and business relations between the two countries. Meghna.
Well, I'm quite optimistic about India-Pakistan relations because there has been this big obstacle about the most favored nations clause of trade between India and Pakistan, and it is sort of almost a done deal, but there are sort of little personality clashes. And BJP has always had much better relations with Pakistan when in power than the Congress has, for various historical reasons. So I think as soon as there is a BJP government in power, there will be a rapprochement with Pakistan. Indeed, one of the first speeches that I saw live on television, Narendra Modi make after he became Prime Ministerial candidate designate. It was in Haryana, and he said, I invite my brothers in Pakistan and let India and Pakistan get together and eliminate poverty, sort of thing. That's what he said, and I wouldn't say I was there. I was sitting in a seat watching it on television, but I was very impressed by that. And he has been making fairly conciliatory statement about it, because that is a BJP tradition. Only a right-wing party can have peace with Pakistan, a left-wing party can't. It's very simple. A secular party can't have peace with Pakistan because they'll be suspected. BJP will never be seen being pro-Pakistan in the month of Sundays. So they have, but I also think that the return of Nawaz Sharif has been a very healthy thing, and Pakistan economy is at last settling down, and good things are happening in Pakistan. I'm very, very optimistic on Pakistan. And so I think that'd be good possibilities. And the thing you said about businessmen of the two countries coming together, I remember saying that 10 years ago at a Commonwealth sort of a thing meeting, that let the diaspora get together and do this, because they can do it without all this tutu going on in India.
Anybody else want to come on that?
Yes. It's a valid point. I had the opportunity to cover Pakistan extensively while I was working for CNN. The ball is really on Pakistan's court on this, because India offered post-favored nation status to Pakistan in the 1990s, and Pakistan is yet to respond by way of a ratified response. And so you really come to a situation that, while I do agree with Lord Desai that it's almost a done deal, but both the previous government, which was the People's Party government, and so far the present government of the Muslim League, have failed to get past the military authorities on this matter. That seems to be the stumbling block. I think businessmen in Karachi and in Lahore, they would like to have this MFN move forward, because it could be a game changer for the two countries. In fact, it could bring peace and tranquility, as it has done in the case of India and China. Because you have an economic stake, then you don't rock the boat. And so that certainly is in the best interest of both countries. But that said, I think the running now needs to be done by Pakistan.
John.
Very quickly, I don't think you can take economic trade links with China as a reason for hope for peace with China, between India and China. Look at what China's been doing with Japan, which is an even bigger trading partner. I'm not nearly as optimistic as Meghnad Desai is, but I'm not as optimistic as he is on the AAP or on poverty. I think
you're just too young, George. You're too young. When you get to my age, you get
not to be our age. I think AAP I know I'm going off the point. I think AAP being the new party will be fantastic, but it won't happen. And I think 10% poverty by 2025 will be even more fantastic. And I think that peace, I'm waving goodbye to a friend, I think that peace between India and Pakistan, to be serious, is undoable. I don't see any chance of Pakistan and India coming to terms on an overall deal in the foreseeable future, for the simple reason it can't be done unless China says okay. China doesn't encourage antagonism between the two countries. It did not back the Kargil War when Musharraf took troops across the LOC. It told Pakistan to pack it up. But that does not mean that China, basically China wants to use Pakistan as an irritant to occupy India's attention. There's no chance of a deal. I agree that on the fringe there might be some help for business because of the business lobby. But other things will happen, and Modi will also have to cope with the right wing of the BJP, which will not want to deal with Pakistan.
Hassan, do you want to come in on this issue?
Well, basically, I agree with what Lord Desai said, that I mean, it's very true that it's only under the BJP government that the Indo-Pakistan relations have been much better. It's because the BJP is a very funny party in the sense that if anybody else talks about peace with Pakistan, then they become anti-national. But when the BJP talks about improving relations with Pakistan, it's a great act of statesmanship. So it's only the right in India and the right in Pakistan which can probably come together and do it. I don't know much about the trade relations, so I would like to comment on that.
There's one other reason why there can't be a deal. It is that when Bajpai and Musharraf did the deal on soft borders, the situation in Pakistan was quite different. It is impossible now, in my view, to do a soft borders deal with Pakistan when Pakistan is full of Taliban, Al-Qaeda and all the other people who want to blow things up, to put it as crudest. How can you possibly have a soft border between India and Pakistan in that situation? So marvellous though it would be, you can't go back to the Musharraf-Bajpai, Musharraf-Manmohan Singh solution of a few years ago.
My question is for Lord Desai. You have a track record of figures. And before you left for India, you had predicted about 256, if I remember correctly, for the BJP and the government. What is your latest take on prediction of the figures? And may I request if you could possibly comment on the point Hassan made about Narendra Modi lacking the moral stature to be India's Prime Minister. Would you just comment on that a little bit?
Okay. Let me just repeat the question to make sure that everybody's heard it. So the question is whether Lord Desai stands by his prediction of 256 seats for the BJP, and I take it allies, which is still a little bit short of a majority in the Lok Sabha, and whether he wishes to comment about the issue of Modi's moral stature.
No, I have upped my forecast for the seats. And not just me, but if you've been following NDTV and seen IBN, I think between 230 to 250 seats on BJP alone, and 275 seats for BJP and the core NDA, which I said, which means Shiv Sena and Shiromani Akali Dal. Not all the other riffraff that have picked up since then.
Let me just...
And Narendra Modi does...
I'm going to come back to you, if I may, on the moral stature issue. I just want to see if we've got a consensus at all among the panel about what the results will be. So, number of seats for the BJP alone. Hassan, your...
I think it's a gross exaggeration to say that the BJP will win 72 seats. So, I mean, that's the NDTV and the CNN, IBN projections that, I mean, they can go up to 300, just BJP alone.
So give us a figure now.
Well, I think they'll be hover around 200, and once they cross 200, probably they'll get all these allies together. But there's no doubt that the BJP will form a government with NDA.
Ashish.
Well, this much...
just on the numbers.
This much I will say is that the BJP will be the largest single party. But I can say a little bit more if you give me a minute, which is this, that the BJP will sweep Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. The rest of the country is still up for grabs. And certainly the Congress will do well in Kerala, Karnataka, and Assam. The big loss for the Congress is Andhra Pradesh, which was their banker. And forecasts about Uttar Pradesh, which is the battleground, 80 seats out of 543. I think the forecasts at the moment seem to be a little dodgy. They were dodgy in 2009, they were dodgy in 2004, and I, from my experience of covering Indian elections, believe that underprivileged people in India will remain quiet when a pollster comes to him. He does not show his card, and then they silently go and vote for a party of their choice. And I also believe that this battleground of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, where you've got major caste factors, I don't think India has emerged out of those caste factors yet. And therefore, the parties of the backward castes, parties of the intermediate castes will, I think, continue to do reasonably well.
So, John, on the numbers.
Nobody's got a clue, and nor have I. But let me just point out two quick things. The last poll that was done by NDTV about 2 weeks ago, just before I came across, the amazing thing was not the numbers they produced, which actually was 226 for the BJP and 282 for the combine, if you include the AIADMK from Tamil Nadu, which you didn't figure.
I did.
The amazing thing was the graph from poll to poll, which they'd done over 3 or 4 months. The line just for Congress just went down and down and down. And the only places where it didn't go down was Karnataka and Assam. It was staggering as one watched it on television, each state coming up and the Congress line going down and the BJP going up.
Yeah.
Whether the Modi fright thing will have an effect, I've no idea. But let me just tell you one thing. If any of you want to have fun, go to the which I did this afternoon, go to the ndtv.com election website, and they've got a list of all the coalitions, and you can play and move the parties across and see what numbers you get. And it's great fun, and you'll get as near an answer as anybody else can.
The BBC should have one of those, shouldn't it?
You should indeed.
But on the other part of the question, does Narendra Modi have the moral stature to be India's Prime Minister?
He doesn't, but nobody else did either. I mean, did Rajiv Gandhi have moral stature, having presided over a slaughter of the largest slaughter of people ever in India after independence was of the Sikhs in Delhi. 3,000 people died. And what did he say? When a big tree falls, the earth shakes. I.e., he didn't even call them puppies, he called them dust. But because he's communist, because he's secular, because Gandhi, Nehru-Gandhi, he's a saint.
Can I just...
Happens.
Oh, sorry.
These things happen, and then Sanjay Gandhi, Sanjay Gandhi was Prime Minister, but at least Indira Gandhi let Sanjay Gandhi conduct a fantastic program of sterilization of Muslim male adults, in which many people defying it were shot. You know, I mean, I don't want to get on with it because, you know, there is so much rewriting of history by the Congress. They have all the universities on their side, all the academics on their side, and so the whole history has been completely rewritten. And we'll have to wait till another 50 years before we get a decent history of the Congress Party.
And can I just make a quick point?
Just very quickly, Hassan.
I mean, he referred to the Congress sterilization campaign, but the Congress did pay a huge price for that. I mean, the Muslims rejected.
No, Muslims paid the price. Congress
Muslims rejected the Congress.
Muslims died. Muslims died.
They also rejected. Yeah, so they did. So they did.
Congress paid no cost.
Come on.
I'm going to bring John in.
Let me just
Don't be so kind.
Let me just put massacres in context. This is not to defend Modi. He presided over, he was the chief minister of Gujarat during those riots, during that massacre. He has responsibility for it, but it's political responsibility, possibly only. But let me just tell you a quick story. 1982, just as I was about to go to India as a Financial Times correspondent, early 1983, we interviewed Mrs. Gandhi, Alan Cass, the Asia editor, and I went along as a new correspondent about to arrive. And the Assam riots were going on. The riots were going on in Assam. And I was horrified, and this was reported in the FT the next day, when she sat there and said, we said, what are you going to do about it? And she said, well, these things just have to happen. And we said, but 6,000 dead. She said, some things you just have to let happen. Let it work its way out.
Yeah.
Now, nobody's suggesting that Indira Gandhi caused those riots, but it's the attitude of the country, it's the attitude of leaders to these things. So just let's have it in context.
And Ashish, you said earlier that
of course, but I think there's a
Narendra Modi did not have
violence,
the moral stature, but he wasn't sufficiently well educated to be in this.
Let
me just bring.
He is educated.
Well,
he finished school. He left in the middle of the college, and he has since got a correspondence course degree. He's not untutored.
So that's why I'm asking.
Sorry about that. He may be a bad guy, but he's not uneducated.
First of all, he didn't finish school.
He did.
He didn't finish school.
He did finish school. He did finish school.
No student worth his salt would do a correspondence course. Let alone at a institution which is somewhat obscure. But to come back to...
He did a correspondence course with Delhi University.
Yes, and that's exactly a very good point. There are a dozen ministers in the Congress government who come from the world's top 5 universities. There is a single person on the front benches of the BJP who has been to a university in the top 200.
Well, you see, they didn't have the money. They didn't have the money.
It is not a matter of money.
This reminds me of an elderly lady who said to me in Delhi last week, wouldn't it have been better, John? Wouldn't it have been better if India had not had universal suffrage at the beginning? Wouldn't it have been better if just those people who were educated had been allowed to vote?
Yeah.
And then maybe...
Only Doon School and Cambridge.
I'm going to...
Only Doon School and Cambridge, nobody else.
Just one...
I think it's true to say that in the last 30 years, Indian central governments have been formed not by waves, but by coalitions. If the vote for the BJP is at the lower end of what you were forecasting, how good is Narendra Modi going to be at negotiating coalitions? A coalition.
How good is Narendra Modi going to be at brokering a coalition if he needs to? Ashish.
Well, first of all, the fact is that he has no experience whatsoever of handling a coalition. He has run an authoritarian government in Gujarat. The Gujarat scenario has been the same as West Bengal under the Marxists for 34 years. The only difference is that in West Bengal it was a leftist government, in Gujarat it's been a rightist government. But the common features in both have been propaganda and terror. And that is how they've controlled the situation election after election. So the man has no experience at the center. As they say, he's not a Washington insider. He has no experience of being in an administration where there are other parties and other views to take into account. It is true that his core alliance is an extremist alliance. You have the Hindu extremists in the BJP, the Marathi Hindu extremists in the Shiv Sena, and the Sikh extremists in the Akali Dal. So there you have it. That may be easy to manage, but what if he needs the support of parties beyond that? That is a very good and very valid question.
John.
Yeah, he doesn't have the experience. I've forgotten who asked the question. He doesn't. Oh, of course. He doesn't have the experience. The question is, if Congress gets more than 100 seats, and these figures show it getting under 100, then the story could be different, because there could be some sort of coalition built around with Congress supporting from the outside or something. On the question of Modi, he has absolutely no experience of that. But it is surprising how many people are willing to join the winning side when it means you can get on the gravy train and all that does for your ministers, and then you make sure you get the Ministry of Power and the Ministry of Defence and all the other ministries that pay well.
I think Modi, like many other chief ministers, Jayalalitha, Mamata Banerjee, is very authoritarian at the state level. He has no experience with the centre, that's true. But there are people in the BJP who have been cabinet ministers in 1998-2004 regime, Arun Jaitley, for example, and they can manage coalitions. Right now, it looks like they're not going to need that many parties to join them in a coalition. Narasimha Rao managed without a majority. because the president has to call the largest single party to form the government. And the largest single party will be BJP, regardless if the Congress gets 100 seats, which I doubt. There's not going to be another solution. They will form, and Vajpayee had George Fernandez manage the coalition, not even a part of the BJP. And Narendra Modi could have Chandrababu Naidu manage the coalition. That's not a problem.
Hassan.
I agree with Lord Desai. Modi may not have personal experience of handling coalition, but the BJP has.
Exactly.
I mean, it has done so many coalitions, so I don't think there's any problem with that.
Sir.
My question is to Ashish first. First of all, when he analyzed 1942 Commission, that was correct analysis. At that time, if Mahatma Gandhi had joined the British when they were fighting back to the wall against dictatorship, perhaps India would have got a united India in 1948-7 after the war. That did not happen because of Mahatma Gandhi's great blunder in 1948. 1947 onwards.
Let's not start that. We will be really here forever.
Concentrate on the 24th.
I think let's move ahead.
I don't want to start on that.
He is more scared of Modi than the people of India. Because what Modi had stood, he fought 3 elections in Gujarat. And if you had seen Gujarat in 2001 and then 2012, you would have seen the difference. Even a blind man would see where Gujarat has gone in the last 11 years. And nobody gets election victories on losses. They get victory only when they achieve something. He has achieved something in Gujarat. And now saying that Bharatiya Janata Party and Modi, they are nothing but extremist Hindu, is completely out of the thing. I don't know why he is so scared, because Hindus are 85%.
He's not scared, that's it,
I'd like to hear from some more voices before I ask the panel.
Exactly. Let's not talk with 1942.
I'd like to hear a few more voices and then ask the panel to make closing remarks, please.
Lavina, a small bunch of questions, but I'll be very quick. Number one, is reserving votes for Jats and Jains and X, Y, and Z an act of secularism? Can we be Jats and what you mentioned, Jats and Jains, is reserving those votes or reserving those sort of seats? Is that an act of secularism? Is it possible to be secular at all? And what is secular when people, Muslim candidates come from the Muslim category, caste and religion are the basis of getting the candidates there? And third, every time we talk of Modi's moral responsibility, but actually Supreme Court has cleared him. Are we now here saying that Supreme Court, we do not value Supreme Court's decision? And what moral responsibility and what are we talking about when a Supreme Court has given him a clean chit?
Okay, thank you.
All these things
My question is simply about the rise of the regional parties over the last 20, 25 years. There's been a lot of focus in the panel on the AAP, but lots of the regional parties will get far more members alongside than the AAP. And Lord Desai mentioned in passing Lalitha in Tamil Nadu, Banerjee in West Bengal, and so on can go on. There has been this long-term trend of the fragmentation, if you like, of political parties and the emergence of regional parties in India. That's why I was so surprised when Hassan Sarur said earlier that he thought that only Congress had the potential to be a national party. I thought myself that it had long since been a national party.
Okay, so we've got a range of questions there about the importance of regional parties, the nature of secularism, about reserved seats by caste and by religion. Are there reserved seats by religion?
No.
No, reserved seats of candidates on the basis of religion.
Okay. And inevitably about the nature of Narendra Modi. Now, I'm going to give the panelists one final chance to address those questions and anything else that they believe is unfinished business about the discussion tonight. Hassan.
First, I think I don't know about the Supreme Court thing. I think there's a lot of ambiguity about it, whether it's really given him a clean chit or not. because there was this SIT and there was another amicus curiae who they had some differences and so on and so forth. Anyway, I have raised a moral issue. I'm not talking about the judicial verdict. He may have been given a clean sheet, but the moral issue remains whether what happened on his watch, whether he was morally responsible for it or not. So that question remains.
Regional parties, I think they did rise very much after 89 and when Mandal was very strong. One of the interesting things that happened is that even these caste parties have realized that you have to perform, you have to deliver development to be able to be re-elected. So people like Nitish Kumar or Mulayam Singh have got to go beyond caste. My own gut feeling is that this is the election of the decline of the regional parties. Except for AIADMK and perhaps Trinamool Congress, no regional party is going to get very many seats in the parliamentary elections. I mean, nobody gets more than 20 anyway, but for example, the Samajwadi Party is going to suffer a big shock, etc. I mean, we can go on for that anyway. As per Supreme Court, I sort of agree with what Hassan said. You know, these things go on and on forever. Somebody says it's not a clean cheat, it's not a dirty cheat, and the amicus curiae says one thing. You know, nobody is guilty till he's proved innocent. And I think in Narendra Modi's case, he will be thought to be guilty until he dies, because no matter how many courts clear him, people who believe that he was guilty will go on believing he's guilty. They say, oh, but it's a moral responsibility. Okay. Life goes on. I know it sounds very cynical, but my question is he going to be Prime Minister or not? He's going to be Prime Minister. Is he going to be a good Prime Minister? Well, I hope so, for the sake of India. But I don't know that he will be a good Prime Minister. It will be a change from Manmohan Singh.
I think, Ashish, you do know whether he'll be a good Prime Minister.
It remains to be seen, but the points raised are, one is about Gujarat. The fact of the matter is, as I said, that in West Bengal, the left front were in government for 34 years. Today, in hindsight, people think that they did mighty little, but they remained in power for 34 years. And the facts and figures that I've given you about Gujarat, if you have any reason to challenge those, then please let me know. But as long as those facts are correct, and these facts come from the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, I do not accept anything other than the fact that the rich have become richer and the poor poorer in Gujarat. The second point about the clean sheet. The Supreme Court has not given Narendra Modi a clean sheet. This is again a propaganda which has been going on, and this is very typical of the RSS. They've been very successful in putting out this word that he's been given a clean sheet. The lowest court in Gujarat, a magistrate's court, has said that they will not interfere with a special investigation which has taken place. That does not mean that the High Court of Gujarat or the Supreme Court of India cannot intervene in the matter. That is the factual situation. So he is innocent until proven guilty, because as an Indian I would respect the law of the land, I would respect the constitution. And the Indian legal system is the same as in Britain. You are innocent until proven guilty. But it does raise a question to me that the United States, not exactly a banana republic, has not till date lifted their travel ban on Narendra Modi. What is it that they have on him that makes them continue with this policy when people think that he's a prospective Prime Minister? They have not. For more than a decade, he remains a pariah. Today, Narendra Modi is in the same category as the leaders of North Korea and Zimbabwe as far as the United States is concerned, which I think is a disgrace.
Let me deal with regional parties quickly and then come back to that impassioned speech. The regional parties are no better than the national parties. If you think Congress is awful, the regional parties are worse. Most of them are entirely focused on their own families and their riches. Or in North India, in Uttar Pradesh, on their caste, Mayawati and the Yadavs, and in Bihar also, they've done little for their states beyond raising the level of their caste. Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal has been a disastrous disappointment because of what she has not done since she successfully ousted the communists, which they deserve to be.
And yet she'll sweep the elections.
And yet she'll sweep back because she's popular with the poor. And however much the middle classes object to what she does, and she does a lot of outrageous things, she will be swept back. The regional parties are no better. So therefore, that's why some of us would focus on the AAP. On a fact, the travel ban only exists for as long until he asks next. If he needs to go to America, he will ask if he can go to America in the normal way, the Prime Minister or whatever does, and if he's been elected, America will say yes. That has been announced.
That's because India is too big an economy for the United States to ignore, and therefore you cannot ignore the Prime Minister of India if he becomes Prime Minister of India. Not because...
If James and Lin can go there, anybody can go there.
And that means per hour is measured by dollars and things and not by morals at all, so therefore we can remove the per hour. But let me just say one last thing and open up something slightly new, but it's on the broad discussion. Ashish, with the greatest respect, who I've never met before this evening, is reflecting the fright, and I mean this politely and kindly. You're reflecting the fright which has swept through the middle class and a so-called elite. Those of you who don't know India well will know there's a lot of people called the elite, which basically means the middle class, which has swept through the middle class in the last 2 years. I first wrote a column in 2002, that's 12 years ago, in the Business Standard in Delhi, and I wrote that Narendra Modi was emerging as the country's next big leader.
Absolutely.
And nobody believed me, and everybody said, how can you possibly like that man? We just had Godra. And I said, look, the man is impassioned. He believes in what he says. He's a great orator. He's also got a sense of humour. I'd met him. I then wrote it again in 2008, and again nobody believed it. I'm not saying they didn't believe me, they didn't believe, even though at that point, Bombay, in an opinion poll, Bombay businessmen voted for him to become Prime Minister in a poll because of the disaster of the terrorism attacks a few weeks earlier in Bombay. All this happened. Nobody believed that he would ever make the step from Gujarat, from Ahmedabad to Delhi. They didn't think it credible. They underestimated the perceived need for leadership after all the years of disastrous Congress government, and they failed to understand the fact that the BJP themselves and Advani himself is responsible for not filling a leadership vacuum. So there was a leadership vacuum in the BJP, there was a leadership vacuum of the country, and nobody spotted the fact that this man could make the move across. And nobody believed it up to a year ago. Even when he was about to become the Prime Ministerial candidate, people still said, oh, it can't happen. And that's the problem. And nobody believed it. And now they are frightened. If it had been realised over the last 5 years, there could have been debate, there could have been understanding, there could have been acclimatisation to the idea, the BJP could have been wound up to try and do something about it. Nobody realised until he was there. It was a brilliant manoeuvre, and I agree with you, it's potentially worrying.
I have my own story that in 2007, after he was elected the second time, I was on NDTV saying that this is the next BJP Prime Minister of India. But I should also say that I'm the Labour Party, and we made a mistake of underestimating Margaret Thatcher. And by God, we suffered for it. We lost 3 straight elections because we thought nobody could possibly elect this woman. If she comes to power, she won't last very long. She'll be removed by the Conservative Party leaders. She will not get elected in 83. Oh, that was Falklands War. She won't get elected in 87, 3 million unemployed. She didn't get elected. And even after she went, we didn't win the election in 1992. Only one last thing. I quite agree with Ashish that if you have not been to Doon School and Cambridge, you should not be Prime Minister of India. But, you know, fortune is kind to India. Rahul Gandhi has been invented as a black hole down which the Communist Party is going to disappear. Good Doon School, Cambridge credentials.
What about Eton in England? What about Eton?
I have hope that Eton will do the same to UK.
I'm going to draw the discussion to a close with the final thought from Meghnad Desai that India may have found its Margaret Thatcher.
Absolutely.
I thank you for being part of what's been a really lively evening. I will ask you all to join us in thanking Rita Payne of the Commonwealth.
Rita for Prime Minister. Rita for Prime Minister.
And join me please in thanking Hassan, Meghnad, John and Ashish for being such a marvellous panel tonight.
Well, all I want to say is I think we've seen Indian democracy at work. There has been much sitting on the fence here, and we've had a strong leadership under Andrew Whitehead. So I think we have high hopes. I think we could almost have had a little sweepstake. Maybe we should have the meeting again after the 16th of May when the results are ready. But I hope you found this whole discussion as invigorating and exciting and entertaining as I have. We've learned a lot. Thank you very much for coming. And I'd just like to say very quickly that there are many more events that we organize. So does the Institute of Commonwealth Studies. So look at their website, look at our website, which is cja-uk.org. We have one which is already filled up, which is on April the 30th, about how safe is the BBC World Service. We'll be launching a book on cricket in Pakistan at a later stage. We'll be looking at items of the Commonwealth Games. But because, as I said earlier, we're all volunteers, and we'd be very grateful if you felt able to make a donation towards keeping us going and holding more events of this kind. And now we invite you to the reception, kindly sponsored by Vita Biotics, so we can continue mingling and talking there. Thanks a lot for coming, and thank you, speakers.